This message comes from NPR sponsor Greenlight. Want to teach your kids financial literacy? With Greenlight, kids and teens use a debit card of their own, while parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and savings in the app. Get your first month free at greenlight.com/NPR.
Hey y'all, you're listening to Ask Code Switch. I'm Lori Lizarraga. We're back with another piping hot episode of Ask Code Switch, the part of the show where we tackle your race and identity questions and confusions. And we got a big one today, so let's just jump right in. This Ask Code Switch question comes from a listener in the city of brotherly love.
Hi, Code Switch. My name is Stefan, and I'm calling from Philadelphia. I'm writing to ask about an issue near and dear to my heart, race and bike lanes. I think everyone deserves access to safe, healthy transportation that doesn't destroy the earth or their communities, but it seems like the bike lane discussion often gets pulled into a race-aligned argument with a lot of unspoken assumptions. My question for Ask Code Switch is, do bike lanes actually cause or accelerate gentrification? More broadly, how can we achieve transportation justice without threatening other kinds of social justice?
Okay, so Stefan's question here is based on a not uncommon assumption that if a bike lane comes to your neighborhood, your rent is going up. But where does this idea come from? Are bike lanes really elevating one community while evicting another? And if that's the case, are bike advocates on the wrong side of progress? That's coming up on Ask Code Switch. We'll be right back.
This message comes from Schwab. When it comes to managing your wealth, Schwab gives you more choices, like full-service wealth management and advice when you need it most. You can also invest on your own and trade on thinkorswim, Schwab's powerful award-winning trading platforms. Plus, you'll get low costs, transparent pricing, and 24/7 live help. Schwab understands it's your financial journey, and they believe you should have choices in how you invest. Learn more at schwab.com. This message comes from NPR sponsor Discover. It's good to share helpful knowledge, so here's a tip that could be doubly helpful. Discover will automatically double all the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cashback Match. That means you could turn $150 cash back to $300. It pays to Discover. See terms at discover.com/creditcard.
The following message comes from NPR sponsor Ameriprise Financial. SVP Marcy Kegler shares why trust is paramount for the relationships Ameriprise financial advisors build with their clients.
We know that the best relationships between financial advisors and clients are rooted in trust. And that trust develops and grows over time. As advisors ask the right questions, listen and understand clients' personal needs, their dreams, their goals, and even what they're afraid of, it helps the advisor develop the right advice that's personalized, tailored to clients' needs, and can help them move toward achieving their dreams and goals with greater confidence.
For more information and important disclosures, visit ameriprise.com/advice. Ameriprise Financial cannot guarantee future financial results. Securities offered by Ameriprise Financial Services, LLC, member FINRA and SIPC.
Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Online. Is your child asking questions on their homework you don't feel equipped to answer? IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid, no matter the age or personality. One subscription gets you everything. One site for all the kids in your home, pre-K to 12th grade. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And NPR listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/NPR.
When voters talk during an election season, we listen. We ask questions, we follow up, and we bring you along to hear what we learned. Get closer to the issues, the people, and your vote at the NPR Elections Hub. Visit npr.org/elections.
I'm Lori. This is Ask Code Switch. Today our question comes from Stefan Zajic in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's a question he says he wrestles with every time he gets on his bike, which for Stefan is pretty often.
There's the perception that bike lanes cause harm. But there's also, I think, an absence of recognition of the harms that are present that bike lanes might actually help. And so I think if I knew that bike lanes didn't cause gentrification, that would be useful information to bring to the table and say, they don't cause this harm and they help ameliorate another harm that's out there. But I don't know the answer, so I don't actually know if they do or not.
So, do bike lanes actually cause or accelerate gentrification? Like Stefan, I live in Philly. Unlike Stefan, I do not ride a bike. I don't even own a bike. I've never owned a bike. So for this question, I went looking for someone with a little more expertise in the world of biking and bike infrastructure.
I am Adonia Lugo, and I am the Equity Research Manager at the UCLA Institute of Transportation Studies, and I also serve on the California Transportation Commission.
Adonia Lugo is a cultural anthropologist who was hired at UCLA into the first position dedicated to equity research in transportation.
I'm Mexican-American, grew up in a largely immigrant community in South Orange County, and was very aware of the racialized dynamics of space where I was from, in terms of racial segregation and kind of like who belonged where.
When Adonia moved to Oregon for college, the culture built around biking in Portland shifted her lifestyle. Portland turned her into an avid cyclist. But after graduation, she moved back to Southern California and was met with hostility out on her bike.
Even on quiet neighborhood streets, drivers had this sense of entitlement to, more road space and that I was in the way. And so I really just started to make connections between what I knew from growing up in terms of expectations of social order and keeping, racialized groups separate and what I was experiencing in the roadway.
Okay, so this brings us to our caller question, Adonia. Our caller, Stefan, is an avid cyclist himself, leads a riding group every week. In Philly, calls himself a bike advocate. He wants to know, do bike lanes and bike infrastructure cause gentrification?
Right. That's a question that I think a lot of people have started wondering about since bicycle advocates started to see some success with getting bike infrastructure added into cities. So I think people are totally not wrong when they observe that there seems to be some kind of relationship between, okay, I'm seeing these new kinds of, street facilities, but also prices are going up or new kinds of businesses are opening.
Yeah.
And what I learned in studying the bicycle advocacy movement was, that was actually a deliberate strategy that advocates pursued in terms of thinking, okay, we want to get more bike infrastructure in place so that more people will feel safe riding bikes. And in order to influence how cities are spending money on things like transportation, infrastructure, street design, you have to get politicians on board. And so for a lot of elected officials, they see their number one job as driving economic growth. So there were reports that came out that said, bikes mean business. Here are the positive effects of bicycle infrastructure on local economies. And we all want to see local economies thrive, right? But when we talk about the inequities that are embedded in our neighborhoods, well, whose thriving are we talking about?
Yeah, so it makes sense that advocates like Stefan would need to wrestle with this idea of who these bike lanes are serving. I'm curious, Adonia, is there a description for a typical bike advocate historically?
Bicycle advocacy actually has a much longer history than I would have guessed when I first started learning about it. It actually goes back to the 1880s when bicycling first started to get popular. And so back then, a bicycle, it was like the Tesla of its day. It was like, oh, super cool machine.
Really?
Oh, yeah, because what had been the option for personal mobility before then? It was a horse. And so this was a just radical, revolutionary new toy that rich white people got to play with.
So the reason people associate bike advocacy with whiteness is because it's true?
Oh, yeah. That's certainly not the only people who are in the bike movement. It actually is a very multiracial movement, but it's very easy to dismiss the work of bicycle advocacy as a special interest group when people associate it with a particular elite.
That's part of the reason our listener wrote in. Stefan wants to make sure that as a white bike advocate, his efforts aren't actively contributing to systemic racism and urban inequality. Like, he wants to make sure that bike lanes aren't causing more harm than good.
Totally. They're a convenient symbol, I think, of people feeling like they don't have control over what's happening in their communities. And here's the key thing. If people are seeing this as part of a broader set of forces that is going to harm their families, that doesn't really encourage them to want to get out and try using the infrastructure, right? But also, well, really, is a bike lane going to make people feel safer biking in a neighborhood where there's gun violence, where there's racialized police violence, where people are undocumented, when there's all these reasons that people have to not want to feel exposed or feel on guard in public space? The infrastructure on its own is not enough to really give them a sense of security.
So what would?
So I'm part of a group of people who has been working since 2016 to define the concept of mobility justice. And what we mean by that is, if we really want to make our streets safer, if we want people to feel like they have mobility options, we need to think, in addition to infrastructure changes and changes to our built transportation systems, what is going on that makes people feel safe or not in our street spaces? So what can we do to show up in solidarity with economic justice, efforts to ensure that people have access to services? Just all these basic things. Transportation is another basic service that we all are interacting with on a daily basis.
And that's like a social justice issue rather than this niche group of cyclists.
Exactly. Exactly. Right.
So in answer to Stefan's question, then, how does he help achieve transportation justice without threatening other communities or other kinds of social justice?
An important component is finding the connections to transportation and mobility that are coming up in other kinds of movement spaces. So maybe it means, instead of having a laser focus on adding bicycle infrastructure, it's joining conversations where communities are talking about overall public works improvements. We have to look at illuminating the connections between how we get around just in our everyday travel in our cities or our regions, and how that connects to bigger struggles for the freedom of mobility and the legacy of enslavement, displacement that is so much at the heart of how our country was created. So not just how do we get people moving outside of cars, but how do we have a system that recognizes the disparate impacts that our transportation systems have had on communities and then correctly gives support, right?
So, Stefan, if this episode has made anything clear, it's that the answers to your questions aren't simple. Bike lanes aren't the boogeyman. They are not inherently bad, and no, they're not even solely responsible for gentrification. But the idea I landed on after talking about all of this is, if your goal as an advocate is to help your community, what does the community say it needs to move safely in their neighborhood? Because it might not be a bike lane. Does that make sense? Y'all let us know what you think. For now, that's our show. You can send us your Ask Code Switch questions on Instagram at NPR Code Switch. If email's more your thing, ours is codeswitch@npr.org. You can subscribe to the podcast on the NPR app or wherever you're listening right now. And if you'd like to support our work, you can sign up for Code Switch Plus. It's small, but really makes a difference for us. And you get to listen to every Code Switch episode without any ads. You can check it out at plus.npr.org/codeswitch. And thanks to everyone who's already a Code Switch Plus subscriber. This episode was produced by Skylar Swenson. It was edited by Courtney Stein. Our fact check was done by Sarah Knight. Our engineer was Kwesi Lee. And a big thanks to our listener, Stefan Zajic in Philly, for sending us your question. Also, want to say a special thanks to Lauren Gonzalez, our project manager, as well as Cher Vincent, Yolanda Sanguini, and the entire content development team for helping make this series possible. Finally, a big old shout out to the rest of the Code Switch Massive: Christina Cala, Javier Lopez, Jess Kung, Leah Danella Dalia Mortada, Verlyn Williams, Jean Demby, and B.A. Parker. This is Ask Code Switch. I'm Lori Lizarraga. Call your mama.
Support for NPR and the following message come from IXL Learning. IXL Learning uses advanced algorithms to give the right help to each kid no matter the age or personality. Get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when you sign up today at IXL.com/NPR.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Visit St. Pete, Clearwater, Florida, where fall color seekers can find 35 miles of sugary white sand beaches and emerald green Gulf waters. Explore the kaleidoscopic colors of more than 30 museums and galleries and over 500 street murals. Paddle through vibrant green mangrove tunnels and take in fiery red, orange, and yellow sunsets night after night. Just a few of St. Pete Clearwater's fall colors. More at visitspc.com.